Hello students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 9, Lesson 2. We're moving on more with George Washington and the very early American government. So Washington faced many problems with the new nation. Starting anything new and untried can be difficult. There were problems coming from within the nation as well as external threats. Today we discuss these problems. So let's start off with the Whiskey Rebellion. In the last lesson we talked about Hamilton's plan, his economic plans, including new federal taxes. In 1791, Congress passed a tax on the manufacture and sales of liquor. It was often referred to as the whiskey tax because whiskey was pretty much the main consumed liquor at the time. The tax was universally despised throughout the country. One of their most favorite things was now more expensive to produce. In western Pennsylvania, the tax was really bad. People were miffed. See, in western Pennsylvania, they grew a lot of corn, and much of it was used to make whiskey, and whiskey was actually the major form of currency in western Pennsylvania. So they preferred whiskey over cash. So it was kind of a big deal for them. So the farmers hated the tax so much that they threatened, beat up, and burned down the houses of tax collectors. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? This army of angry farmers grew and started to become a real problem for the federal government. They basically were not collecting any of the whiskey tax in western Pennsylvania. To deal with this, Washington sent an army to dispel the Whiskey Rebellion and enforce the tax. The farmers kind of gave up and went home when they heard an army was coming. Some of the leaders were convicted of treason and hanged, but many just had to start paying the tax, which was now enforced by some soldiers left behind by Washington. The whole incident showed that the government was not afraid to flex its muscle to enforce the law. Here's your angry farmers. They did the old tar and feathering back from the Revolution. Let's talk about challenges in the West. The Northwest Territories were a hotbed of trouble for Washington. The Spanish and British did their part to stir up the natives and get them to attack American settlers. This would prevent the Americans from spreading rapidly west, or so they thought. Now, Washington signed treaties with the natives in the area, but settlers would ignore the treaties and move where they wanted to anyways. As a result, there were Native American attacks on settlers. Washington had to send an army, which actually lost to the natives in the Northwest, led by a chief named Little Turtle. So Little Turtle defeated this first army. This wouldn't last though. American forces tried again and marched into the Northwest Territories in 1794 under the leadership of a Revolutionary War general by the name of Anthony Wayne. So there goes General Anthony Wayne, and he defeated the natives at what's called the Battle of Fallen Timbers, forcing them off their land, really pushing them back beyond the line. So basically, the United States took control of what is mostly Ohio. Let's move on to problems with Europe. In 1793, France had its own revolution. It's called the French Revolution. They were overthrowing the monarchy. At first, Americans supported this revolution, but it turned really, really violent. And some Americans began to think that the French were going too far. France and Britain went to war that same year, 1793. Americans were split, with some favoring Britain and some favoring France. There were a lot of people, the weapon of choice in the French Revolution was the guillotine, and a lot of people lost their heads. Very violent. Washington's plan was to stay neutral in this whole Britain and France affair. However, this proved difficult. France was trying to recruit American volunteers to attack British ships, and the British were seizing American ships that were trading with France. The British had this practice of impressment, where they would take U.S. sailors and force them to work for the British Navy. Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality, saying the U.S. wasn't taking any sides. He sent John Jay, remember the guy who made the Supreme Court Justice? He sent John Jay to make a treaty with Britain. Jay's treaty got the British to agree to finally remove all of their troops from American soil. Some had been lingering, but actually didn't do anything about the impressment, so some people didn't like this treaty. They thought it was stupid, but it was narrowly passed and approved by the Senate. Now, Jay's treaty made Spain nervous. Spain thought that the US and Britain were now going to team up in North America, and this would be bad for Spain's North American interests. To settle these qualms of Spain, Washington sent Thomas Pinckney, all the way to Spain to work out a treaty. Pinckney's treaty gave Americans the right to use the Mississippi River, mostly for moving goods, and to even trade at Spanish New Orleans. That's what we're going to learn about the Washington era, except this last little part. After 8 years as president, that's 2 terms, Washington decided he had enough, and he made his parting address. He said, "'Tis our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world, so far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it." These words would affect American foreign policy for 100 years. He also warned us about factions, which is another name for political parties. We'll talk more about that in the coming lessons. Wise words, Mr. President, wise words indeed. We'll call it there. Go ahead and move on to your assignment and let me know if you have any questions. Hey, have a good one.